Hello dear students, welcome to the lecture series of Object Oriented Programming. In this lecture, we are going to see the basic characteristics of bad software design, and we will see what shall we know about the classes before designing and implementing the object oriented software. At the end of this lecture, you will be able to analyze the causes of design cancer in the object oriented software development. When you develop a software, you must follow the software development lifecycle, which consists of the different phases as communication, planning, design, coding, implementation and testing. In the communication phase, you gather the requirements from the customer, and in the planning phase, you plan those requirements, when and how those requirements will be implemented and delivered to the customer. In the design phase, you will take those requirements as an input and prepare a software design, a software architecture, and that software architecture will be given to the developers team for actual implementation by some of the programming language. Once the software is ready, it will be tested and delivered to the customer if it is giving you the expected output. If the output is not expected as per the customer's requirement, then the software will be, the changes will be preferred in the software, and then again the software will be tested for the expected output. Now, if you observe all the phases of software development lifecycle, you may have noticed that how the design phase is important. The design phase is very important because whatever we have designed, that will be given to the development team, and the software team, the development team will develop what we have given as an input, what design we have given as an input to them. So we have to take care of the design of the software very well. We have to follow all the principles of software design. If you do not follow the principles of software design, then your software will not be useful for the future use. Here are some of the characteristics of bad software design. If you observe these characteristics in your software development, then your software may not be good for the future use. Your software may not be good for reusability concept. Now, these are the four principles. The first one is rigidity. Rigidity is the tendency of a software to be difficult to change. Every change causes a cascade of subsequent changes in the dependent modules. In the software development, requirement changes number of time. Requirements of the customer changes number of time, and hence when the requirement got changed, the design of the software will also get changed. Every time when the requirements get changed, we need to accommodate the change in the design phase, in the design of that software. So your design should be in such a way that whatever the changes has occurred from the customer side, that must be accommodated in the design easily. The next principle is fragility principle. It is a tendency of a software to break in many places every time it is changed. Often, the breakage occurs in the areas that have no conceptual relationship with the area that was changed. Now, let me give you the example. Your system has 5 modules, and according to the customer's requirement, we have made the changes in one of the module. Now, what about the remaining 4 modules? Whatever the changes we have made in one of the module of that 5 modules, that changes may cause the change in remaining 2 modules of the software development, because those 2 modules may be dependent upon the module which we have changed. Now, what about the remaining 2 modules? Even though those remaining 2 modules are not dependent, are not related to the previous module which we have changed, still changes may occur in that modules also. That is called as a fragility. Then the next characteristics is immobility. Immobility is the inability of a software to reuse from the other projects or from the parts of the same project. The work and risk required to separate the desirable parts of the software from the undesirable parts are too complex, so the software is simply rewritten instead of reused. Now, sometimes what happens when we design a new software or when you want to implement a new software, sometimes that new software may be similar to the previous software which we have already developed and implemented. Now, sometimes what developers team will do, developers team will take some of the part or want to take some of the part from the previous software, that some of the part may be as it is or maybe with some changes. Then the immobility characteristics, if it exists in that old software, what will happen, some of the part of that software we want for our development and some of this part from that software we don't want, as it does not require for our purpose or for our development. Then what we have to do, we have to separate the desirable part from the undesirable part. But if the immobility characteristic is available in your software design, in your software, then what will happen, it will be too complex, it will be too hard to separate the desirable parts from the undesirable part. Then in that case, your developers team will think that let us write a new code, let us design a new software instead of using the previous one. So the reusability concept will not be applicable here, and that is immobility. Then the next characteristics of bad design is viscosity. There are two types of viscosities. The first one is viscosity of design and the second one is viscosity of environment. When the changes has occurred, as I told you, depending upon the customer's requirement, changes may occur number of times in our software development, and whenever the changes will occur, we have to change the design of our software. So when the changes has occurred, the engineer usually find more than one way to make the changes in the software design. But out of that number of ways, one way may preserve our previous design and the other way may not preserve our previous design. But initially we may not know that which way will preserve the design and which way will not preserve the design. So that is viscosity of the design. And the next one is viscosity of environment. So when the development environment is low and inefficient, it will be considered as a viscosity of environment. So these are the four important characteristics of bad design, and if you observe those four characteristics in your design, then your software is of no use. Now, when you develop an object oriented software, as I told you, you have to follow some of the principles of object oriented programming. In the same way, we must know what are the different classes involved in our software, and we must know why those classes exist. We must know what are the attributes, and we must know what are the functions that classes are going to perform. So let us see what we should know about the classes, which knowledge we should have about our classes which are involved in the software development before the software development and implementation. So the first one is, why does this class exist? It is a description of the role class plays in the overall system design as the result of analysis and this special implementation. Now let us take a simple example of library management system. Now in the library management system, if you observe, the important classes are user, librarian, book, print receipt, etc. for example. Now why that user class should be there in the library management system? Because there are different users and user class will have some attributes and functions which that user class will perform, and that user class will help us to maintain what are the different users from which department. For example, what is the user ID, and this class will help us to maintain all the database of that respective user. So that's the reason user class should be there in that library management system. Then the next is, what are the attributes of this class and what do they describe? We should know if the user class exists in the library management system, we should know what are the attributes of that class. Now, in the library management system, if I consider a user class, the attributes of the user class are user ID, name, department name, and phone number. Okay, then we should know what data type they have, the attributes have. For example, user ID will have a data type as an integer, name attribute will have a data type as a string. We should know it before the development of our actual system. If we know about the classes in detail, then only it is possible for us to design our system, and once the design is ready, it will be easy for us to implement the system. Then the next one is, we should know what are the methods of this class. For example, I have user class in my library management system. Then the methods of this class are issue book, return book, pay fine, update details, etc. So these methods are there in my user class because user may issue the book and that record should be maintained. User may return the book, and what are the operations that user has performed, that must be known to the librarian, that must be recorded somewhere, and that's the reason these methods are included in this class. So every class is defined with the set of methods used to assign the values to the attributes. These methods are also used to assign the values to the attributes, and we should know what are the different methods and why those methods are used. Some methods in the class are private methods and some methods in the class are public methods. Then we must know which method is private and which method is public. Public methods can be accessible to the other classes also, but private methods will be accessible to that respective class only. Then each method should be documented, and in that documentation we should mention that what task method perform, what task that method has performed on behalf of the class. For example, issue book, then what that issue book method will do, issue book method will take the name, user ID, name, department name and phone number, and then will maintain that which book the user has issued, and the book is of which author, that record will be maintained. Then we should also know that what data types are to be expected as an arguments when we work with when the methods will be included in that class, and we should know what value that method should return. Now for example, if I have a issue book as a method means function. If we have a issue book as a method, then what value that method should return, what value that function should return, that the user has issued some XYZ book. For example, user has issued Balguru Swami object oriented programming by Balguru Swami. So that book has been issued by the user. So that will be the value of method. That will be the return value of the method. Then we should know what is the relevance to the other classes of that respective class. Now for example, in the library management system, we have different classes as user, book, librarian, etc. Now we should know how the classes like user is related to the book, book is related to the librarian, and librarian is related to the user. Of course, librarian has to control the complete book issue and return process. Okay, so librarian will be the main class, and that class will control the two other classes, that is book class and user class. So before implementing the actual system, actual object oriented system, we must know what are the classes, what are the attributes, what are the methods of that class, as well as we must know who is the main class, and that main class is controlling how many classes and how they are related with each other. Okay, how those classes are going to interact with each other. So if we know this, then it will be easy for us to design an object oriented software, and once the design is ready, it will be very easy for us to implement that software. So I hope you are clear with that what we should know about the classes and characteristics of bad software design. We will meet you. I will meet you in the next lecture. Thank you.